The snow fell heavy over Redemption Creek that December morning in 1876, each flake like a piece of ash from heaven's forge. The wooden sign swayed in the bitter wind, its paint peeling, but its message clear enough. Sterling Home for Orphans. Public auction. December 20th. All sales final. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the gathering crowd, his breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. At 38 years old, he had the weathered face of a man who had seen too much and the careful posture of someone who expected nothing good from the world anymore. His coat was leather-worn soft by years of Wyoming winters. His boots were muddy from the ride into town. His eyes gray as the winter sky watched the proceedings with the detached interest of a man who had stopped caring about most things 5 years ago. The crowd pressed closer to the platform. Farmers, ranchers, a few shopkeepers looking for cheap labor. They shuffled their feet in the snow and pulled their collars tight against the wind. Their faces showed the same calculation, the same cold assessment of value versus cost. Children were expensive to feed but useful if you picked the right ones. On the platform, 5 children stood in a ragged line. The oldest was a girl maybe 10 years old with dark hair that caught the light in a way that suggested something other than pure English blood. Her face was gaunt, her clothes little more than rags held together with hope and frozen thread. She held the hand of a boy 6 years old perhaps, who stared at nothing with eyes that had stopped seeing the world months ago. The boy's lips were pressed together in a thin line. He did not move. He did not blink. He was a statue of a child, carved from silence and trauma. Next to them stood a girl who could not have been more than 4 years old. She favored one leg, standing at an awkward angle that spoke of a deformity she had been born with or acquired through some childhood accident no one had bothered to tend properly. Her eyes darted around the crowd like a trapped animal searching for escape routes that did not exist. The 4th child was a boy 12 perhaps, with the hard edge of someone who had learned to fight for everything and trust nothing. His jaw was set. His fists were clenched. Even from a distance, Ethan could see the coiled anger in him, the rage of someone who had been betrayed by every adult who had ever made him a promise. The 5th child was a girl of 8, thin as a rail with enormous eyes that took in everything but revealed nothing. She did not speak. She simply watched. Her silence had a different quality than the young boy's. His was the silence of trauma. Hers was the silence of choice. Victor Sterling stood behind them like a merchant displaying his wares. He was a heavy man, 54 years old, with the soft hands of someone who had never done real work, and the calculating eyes of someone who had made a career of exploiting those who had no other options. He wore a suit that was too fine for this rough town, too clean for the dirty business he conducted. His smile was wide and false. "Gentlemen," he called out, his voice carrying over the wind. "Ladies, thank you for coming out on this cold morning. I know the weather is not ideal, but the Lord's work waits for no man, and these children, God bless them, they need homes." A few people in the crowd nodded. Most just waited. "Now," Sterling continued, rubbing his hands together as if warming them, though Ethan suspected it was more the anticipation of profit that motivated the gesture. "I run a Christian establishment. I feed these young souls. I clothe them. I teach them the Word of God and the value of honest labor. But there are always more children than there are resources, you understand. And some of these young ones, well, they would do better in a working household, a farm, a ranch. Somewhere they can contribute, earn their keep, learn the dignity of toil." He gestured to the oldest girl. "This one here, her name is Rose Hayes. Strong girl, good worker. She can cook, clean, sew. Not much education, but she learns quick when properly motivated. Her mother was half Comanche, so you get some of that Indian stamina, that endurance. Starting bid $15. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone laughed. "She looks half savage, all right," a farmer called out. "What's wrong with her that you're selling her so cheap?" Sterling's smile did not waver. "Nothing wrong with her at all, friend. Just need the space for younger children. This one is getting to the age where she needs more structure than I can provide. You take her on, she will work hard. I guarantee it." $15, a man near the front said. He was a rancher by the look of him, big hands, weathered face, the kind of man who saw children as small adults useful for their labor and little else. "Excellent," Sterling said. "Do I hear 16? "Wait," the rancher said. "She comes with that boy, the one she's holding." Sterling glanced at the silent child, the 6-year-old statue. "Ah, William. Yes, he is her brother. He does not speak much, I am afraid, some kind of trauma before he came to us. But he is healthy enough, strong back for his age. You could take both for, say, $25. The rancher shook his head. "I don't need a mute boy, just the girl." Rose's hand tightened on her brother's fingers. She looked down at him, then back at the rancher. Her voice was small, but clear. "We stay together," she said. Sterling's smile thinned. "Young lady, you do not have a say in this matter." "We stay together," Rose repeated louder this time. Sterling's hand moved fast, a sharp cuff to the side of her head that made her stumble. The crowd barely reacted. Discipline was expected. Children who spoke out of turn needed correction. But Rose did not cry. She straightened, still holding her brother's hand, and stared at Sterling with eyes that burned with something fiercer than fear. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. He had not felt much of anything in 5 years, not since the fever had taken Sarah and left him alone in a house that echoed with her absence. He had walked through the world like a ghost, performing the motions of living without any real investment in the outcome. He ate because the body required fuel. He slept because exhaustion demanded it. He worked the ranch because there was nothing else to do with the hours between dawn and dusk. But looking at that girl, at the way she refused to let go of her brother, even when struck, even when the whole world was telling her that her love did not matter, that her loyalty was worthless, something in Ethan woke up. He thought of Sarah, of the way she used to sit by the fire in the evenings and talk about the children they would have. 5, she always said. She wanted 5 children, a full house, noise and laughter and chaos and love. "We will build more rooms," she had said, her eyes bright with dreams. "We will fill this ranch with family." And then the yellow fever had come swift and merciless, and Ethan had been 3 counties away, chasing some nobody, outlaw for a bounty that did not matter. By the time he rode home, Sarah was already in the ground. The house was empty. The dreams were ash. 5 children she had wanted. On the platform, Sterling was losing patience. $20 for the girl, the rancher said. Final offer, just her. Rose looked at her brother. William stared at nothing. She leaned down and whispered something in his ear. Ethan could not hear the words, but he saw the way the boy's hand tightened on hers. He saw the way Rose straightened her shoulders, lifting her chin as if preparing for battle. "Take him," she said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Take my brother instead of me." The crowd went still. "What did you say?" Sterling asked. Rose turned to face him. "I said take him. He is worth more than me. He is small. He can fit into tight spaces. He can work hard when he is not scared. Take him and let me go back to the orphanage. I will not complain. I will not cause trouble. Just take care of him." The wind howled, the snow fell, the crowd waited. And Ethan Cole, who had not made a decision that mattered in 5 years, who had drifted through life like smoke through empty rooms, felt his hand rise. $50, he said. Every head turned. Sterling blinked. "I beg your pardon." Ethan stepped forward, pulling the bills from his coat pocket. $50 for all 5. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. Sterling's eyes narrowed. "Sir, I do not believe you understand the situation. These are individual sales. You do not need to buy them all." "I know what I am buying," Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. $50, right now, all 5 children. You give me the papers, I give you the money, and we are done." Sterling studied him. The other bidders watched with the curiosity of people witnessing something unusual, something that did not fit the normal patterns of their world. "You want all 5?" Sterling asked. "Even the defective ones?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "They are not defective. The boy is mute. The little girl is crippled. The oldest is half Indian. The 12-year-old is a thief and a troublemaker. The 8-year-old refuses to speak. You are aware of these facts." "I am aware," Ethan said, "that they are children who need a home. And I have a home that needs children. $50, final offer." Sterling's smile returned wider now, sharper. This was more than he had expected to make from the whole lot of them combined. He had planned to sell them individually, maybe get $30 total if he was lucky. $50 for 5 problem children was a windfall. "Sold," he said, extending his hand. Ethan counted out the bills. Sterling counted them again slowly, savoring each one. Then he produced a sheaf of papers from his coat. "Sign here," he said. "This transfers custody. They are your responsibility now. Anything happens to them, it is on you. They run away, you do not get a refund. They steal, you do not come back to me. They get sick, you do not ask for help." "Clear?" "Clear," Ethan said, and signed. The papers changed hands. The money disappeared into Sterling's coat. The transaction was complete. Sterling gestured to the children. "Go with him. You belong to Mr. Cole now." Rose stared at Ethan. William stared at nothing. The 4-year-old girl whimpered. The 12-year-old boy's eyes were full of suspicion. The 8-year-old watched everything with those enormous, unreadable eyes. Ethan looked at them, these 5 broken children who had just become his responsibility, and felt the full weight of what he had done settle onto his shoulders. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's go home." They did not move at first. Children who had been betrayed learned not to trust easily. Children who had been sold learned that adults always wanted something. "I am not going to hurt you," Ethan said. "I am not going to sell you. I am not going to leave you. I am taking you to my ranch, and you are going to live there, and you are going to be safe. I promise." Promises from adults meant nothing. Rose knew this. The 12-year-old knew this. Even the littlest ones had learned that words were just air, that the only truth was what people did not what they said. But there was something in Ethan's face, some quality of exhausted honesty that made Rose take a step forward. And when she moved, William moved with her, still holding her hand. And when they moved, the others followed because children who had nothing left clung to any hope, no matter how small. They climbed into Ethan's wagon. The wood was old but solid. The blankets were clean. There was space for all of them, and none of the cramped, suffocating closeness of the orphanage dormitory. As the wagon pulled away from the platform, Rose looked back once. Sterling was counting his money, already moving on to other business. The crowd was dispersing. The auction was over. She turned forward, looking at the man who had bought them. He sat on the driver's bench, his shoulders hunched against the wind, his eyes on the road ahead. He did not look like a monster. He did not look like salvation either. He just looked like a tired man doing something he did not fully understand. Next to her, William pressed closer. The 4-year-old Lucy was already falling asleep against her shoulder. The 12-year-old Daniel sat as far from Ethan as possible, watching him with the wary eyes of a wolf in a trap. The 8-year-old Esther had pulled out a small piece of slate and was writing something on it with a nub of chalk. Rose leaned over to read it. Why, the slate asked. Rose did not have an answer. The wagon rolled on through the snow. Behind them, Redemption Creek grew smaller. Ahead, the mountains rose like ancient gods, indifferent to human suffering. And somewhere between the past and the future, 5 children who had been sold and 1 man who had bought them began a journey none of them could have predicted. The ranch appeared after an hour of silent travel. It was larger than Rose had expected. The house was wood 2 stories with a wide porch and windows that reflected the gray winter sky. Smoke rose from the chimney. Fences marked the boundaries of fields, now buried under snow. A barn stood solid against the wind. "Here," Ethan said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "This is home." Home. The word felt strange, foreign. Rose had not had a home since the fire. None of them had. They climbed down from the wagon, moving slowly, uncertain. Ethan led them to the porch, opened the door, gestured them inside. The house was warm. A fire burned in the hearth. The furniture was simple but well made. Everything was clean. There was a smell of wood smoke and something else, something faint like lavender or rose water, as if a woman had lived here once and her presence still lingered in the walls. "2 bedrooms upstairs," Ethan said. "Girls in one, boys in the other. There is a loft if we need more space. I will sleep in the barn tonight. Tomorrow we will figure out better arrangements." Daniel spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, hostile. "Why are you sleeping in the barn?" "So you feel safe," Ethan said simply. "We are not safe. We will never be safe." Ethan met his eyes. "Maybe. But you are safer than you were this morning." It was not a good answer, but it was an honest one, and somehow that mattered. Lucy, the 4-year-old, stumbled. Her bad leg gave out and she fell, hitting the floor hard. She immediately curled into a ball, hands over her head, waiting for the blow that always came when she made a mistake. Ethan knelt beside her. He did not touch her. He simply waited until she realized no one was hitting her, no one was yelling. Slowly she lowered her hands. "You are not in trouble," Ethan said. "The floor is slippery. It happens. Can I help you up?" Lucy stared at him. Then very slowly she nodded. Ethan lifted her gently, setting her on her feet. "Does your leg hurt?" She nodded again. "I will see what I can do about that. For now, rest, all of you. There is food in the kitchen. Take what you want. No one is going to stop you. No one is going to punish you. Eat, sleep. Tomorrow we will talk." He turned to leave. Rose's voice stopped him. "Why did you buy us?" Ethan paused in the doorway. For a long moment he did not answer. Then, without turning around, he spoke. "My wife wanted 5 children. She died before we could have them. Today I saw 5 children who needed someone. It seemed like the thing she would have wanted me to do." "What was her name?" Rose asked. "Sarah." "Where is she buried?" "Out past the barn, under the oak tree." Rose absorbed this. "Can we visit her?" Ethan finally turned. His eyes were bright with something that might have been tears, but his voice was steady. "Yes," he said. "She would have liked that." He left, then closing the door behind him. The 5 children stood in the warm house, listening to his footsteps fade across the porch, across the yard, toward the barn, where he would sleep alone so they could feel safe in a place that was now impossibly theirs. William, who had not made a sound in 8 months, who had watched his parents burn and had locked all his words inside where the fire could not touch them, reached out and touched the blanket on the nearest bed. It was soft, clean. It smelled like sunshine and soap. A single tear rolled down his cheek. He did not make a sound. But his hand gripped Rose's tighter, and she knew what he could not say. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this man would keep his promise. Maybe, just maybe, they had found something worth believing in. Outside, the snow continued to fall. In the barn, Ethan sat on a pile of hay, holding a small photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. He spoke to the photograph as if she could hear him. "I do not know what I am doing, Sarah. I bought 5 children today. 5. I do not know how to be a father. I do not know if I can keep them safe. But you wanted this. You wanted a house full of children. So here we are. Help me. Please, help me not to fail them." The photograph, of course, did not answer. But somewhere in the silence, somewhere in the space between what was lost and what might still be found, Ethan felt something shift. Not hope exactly, not yet, but possibility. The faint, fragile beginning of belief that maybe broken things could be mended, that maybe empty houses could be filled, that maybe a man who had forgotten how to live might learn again by teaching 5 children how to trust. The first day ended. The first night began. And in the spaces between sleep and waking, between fear and hope, 5 children and 1 man began the slow, painful, beautiful work of becoming a family. Dawn came cold and pale to the ranch, the sun barely strong enough to penetrate the thick Wyoming winter. Inside the house, 5 children woke to the unfamiliar sensation of warmth, of full bellies from the bread and cheese they had eaten the night before, of blankets that did not smell of mildew, and other children's fear. Rose woke first. She always did. 8 months of sleeping with one eye open had trained her body to mistrust rest. She lay still for a moment, cataloging her surroundings. Lucy slept curled against her, the little girl's bad leg twisted at an awkward angle. On the other bed, Esther sat upright, already awake, watching the door with those enormous, unblinking eyes. From the room across the hall came silence. The boys were either still asleep or, like Rose, awake and waiting to see what this new day would demand of them. Downstairs, something clattered. Footsteps. The sound of a stove being stoked. Rose slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Lucy, and moved to the top of the stairs. Esther followed her like a shadow. In the kitchen, Ethan stood over a cast-iron skillet, attempting to flip what might have been intended as pancakes, but looked more like scorched accidents. Smoke rose from the pan. He cursed under his breath, scraped the blackened disc onto a plate, and started again. Rose descended the stairs slowly. Ethan glanced up, saw her, nodded. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Rose replied. Silence. The pancake batter sizzled. Ethan poured another misshapen circle into the pan. "I am not much of a cook," he admitted. "Sarah handled the kitchen. I handled the livestock. We had an arrangement." Rose did not know what to say to that. She watched him work, watched the careful way he tried to get the heat right, the pancake golden instead of burnt. On his 4th attempt, he succeeded. He slid it onto a plate, added butter, poured a thin stream of honey over it. "Here," he said, offering it to her. Rose stared at the plate. "All of it. All of it." "What about you?" "I will make more." She took the plate. The pancake was still warm. It smelled like honey and butter and something she could not name, something that felt like safety, even though she knew safety was a lie adults told children to make them compliant. Esther appeared at her elbow. Ethan saw her, nodded, started another pancake. By the time the sun had fully risen, all 5 children sat around the table. Ethan had managed to produce a stack of pancakes, some bacon that was more crispy than it should have been, and a pot of coffee that he did not offer the children because even he knew his limits. They ate in silence. Not the tense, fearful silence of the orphanage where speaking meant attracting attention, and attention meant punishment. This was different. This was the silence of people who did not yet know what to say to each other, who were feeling their way through unfamiliar territory without a map. Daniel, the 12-year-old, ate like a starving wolf. 4 pancakes, 6 strips of bacon. He ate until his stomach was tight, until he physically could not fit another bite, and then he sat back, and something happened that Rose had never seen before. Daniel started to cry. Not the loud, dramatic crying of a child throwing a tantrum. This was quiet. Tears sliding down his face while his jaw clenched, while his hands gripped the edge of the table as if holding on against a strong wind. "You okay?" Ethan asked. Daniel shook his head, then nodded, then shook his head again. "I have never," he said, his voice breaking, "I have never been this full in my life." The words hung in the air. Lucy stopped chewing. William, still silent, looked at Daniel with eyes that understood. Esther's slate remained blank, but her hands trembled slightly. Ethan set down his coffee cup. He looked at each of them in turn, at these children who had been starved of more than just food, who had learned that hunger was their constant companion, and that adults who promised sustenance were liars. "From now on," Ethan said, "you eat until you are full, every meal, every day, no exceptions, no asking permission. If you are hungry, you eat. That is the rule in this house." Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What if we eat too much? What if we use up all the food? Then I buy more food. What if you run out of money? I have money, and if I run out, I sell a horse. And if I run out of horses, I sell land. And if I run out of land, I figure something else out. But you will not go hungry, not in this house, not ever again." It was a promise, and promises meant nothing. But Daniel wanted to believe it. They all did. So they nodded and they finished their breakfast, and they tried very hard not to think about what would happen when this dream ended and reality returned. After breakfast, Ethan showed them the ranch, the barn where 6 horses lived in clean stalls with fresh hay, the chicken coop where hens scratched and clucked, the workshop where tools hung in neat rows and half-finished projects waited for attention, the fields empty now under snow but ready for spring planting. "This is a working ranch," Ethan said. "There are chores, feeding animals, gathering eggs, mucking stalls. But there is also time to rest, time to learn, time to be children." Daniel looked skeptical. "What do you mean, be children?" "I mean play, read, explore, whatever it is children do when they are not working." "We have always been working." Ethan stopped walking. He looked at Daniel, at this boy who had never had a childhood, who had been forced to be an adult before he had finished being a child. "Then you will have to learn," Ethan said quietly, "and I will have to learn with you." They found the workshop after that, and in it Daniel discovered something that made him pause. Rifles, 3 of them hanging on the wall, well-maintained, oiled, ready. "You know how to use these?" Daniel asked. "Yes." "Will you teach me?" Ethan considered. Teaching a 12-year-old boy to shoot was not a small thing, but teaching him to defend himself, to have power in a world that had taken all his power away, that was something else entirely. "I will teach all of you," Ethan said. "Rose, you too, and when Lucy is old enough, her as well. You need to know how to protect yourselves. The world is not always kind. You should know how to fight back." Rose stepped forward. "You think we will need to fight?" "I hope not. But hope is not a strategy." That afternoon he took Rose and Daniel to a clearing behind the barn. He showed them how to hold the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger instead of pulling it. Rose's first shot went wide. Her second clipped the target. Her third hit center mass. Daniel's first shot kicked the rifle back into his shoulder hard enough to bruise. His second was better. By his 5th, he was hitting the target more often than not. Ethan watched them, these children, learning to be dangerous, and felt a complicated mix of pride and sorrow. They should have been learning to read, to dance, to dream. Instead, they were learning to survive. While they shot, William sat on a fence post nearby, watching. He did not speak. He had not spoken since the fire. But his eyes followed every movement, cataloging, learning, storing information against some future need. Lucy and Esther stayed back at the house. Lucy because her leg hurt too much to walk the distance. Esther because she preferred observation to participation. When the lesson was done, when Rose and Daniel had each fired 20 rounds and their shoulders ached from the recoil, Ethan led them back to the house. On the way, Rose asked the question that had been building in her since breakfast. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan did not pretend not to understand. "Doing what?" "All of it. The food, the house, teaching us to shoot. You do not know us. We could be terrible. We could steal from you. We could burn this place down and leave." "You could," Ethan agreed, "but you will not." "How do you know?" He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Because you spent your last bit of strength carrying your brother through the desert. Because you offered yourself to be sold instead of him. Because you are 10 years old, and you have more courage than most men I knew in the war. That is how I know." Rose felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, opening, like ice on a frozen river, the first signs of spring. "My brother does not talk," she said, "not since the fire." What fire? And so she told him about the house they had lived in with their parents, about the night 8 months ago when smoke filled the hallways and flames ate the walls, about how she had grabbed William and run, but their parents were trapped upstairs, and she had heard them screaming, and William had watched the whole thing happen. "He has not said a word since," Rose finished. "The doctor said it might be permanent. Sterling said he was defective, worthless." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Sterling is wrong. Your brother is not defective. He is hurt. There is a difference." "What difference?" "Broken things stay broken. Hurt things can heal." Rose wanted to believe that. She wanted it so badly it hurt worse than hunger, worse than cold, worse than anything except the memory of her parents' screams. They walked the rest of the way in silence. That night, the first incident happened. Daniel, unable to sleep, wandered downstairs. He found the pantry door unlocked. Inside were sacks of flour, jars of preserves, smoked meat hanging from hooks. Enough food to last months. He took a loaf of bread, not to eat. He was not hungry, but to have, to hide under his mattress, to know it was there in case the good times ended and the hunger returned. Ethan found him in the kitchen, bread clutched to his chest. "Taking provisions?" Ethan asked. Daniel tensed, ready for the blow, the punishment, the lecture about stealing and ingratitude. "Smart," Ethan said instead. "If I were you, I would do the same. Take whatever you need, but know this. Tomorrow there will be more bread, and the day after, and the day after that. Eventually, you will trust that. But until then, take what you need." Daniel stared at him. "You are not angry. You have been hungry. Now you are scared you will be hungry again. That is not a crime. That is survival." Daniel clutched the bread tighter. "What if I take too much? Then I will tell you. But right now you have one loaf. That seems reasonable?" Daniel went back upstairs. He put the bread under his mattress. It stayed there for 3 days before he finally admitted to himself that maybe, just maybe, there would always be more. The days developed a rhythm: breakfast, chores, lessons in reading and numbers taught by Ethan with a patience he had not known he possessed, lunch, more chores, time to play, though none of them knew how at first, dinner, stories by the fire, bed. Lucy's leg remained a problem. She limped badly, favoring her left side, and by evening she could barely walk. Ethan studied the issue, measured her legs, and spent 3 nights in his workshop building something. On the 4th morning, he presented her with a pair of shoes. They looked normal at first glance, but the sole on the left was thicker, built up with layers of leather to compensate for her shorter leg. "Try these," he said. Lucy slipped them on, stood, took a step. The limp was still there, but less pronounced. She took another step, then another. Then she actually ran across the room for the first time in her life, without pain shooting up her leg with every footfall. She stopped in the middle of the kitchen and burst into tears. Ethan knelt in front of her, concerned. "Do they hurt? I can adjust them." "No," Lucy sobbed. "They do not hurt. That is the problem. They do not hurt." She threw her arms around his neck, this 4-year-old child who had been called defective and worthless, who had been taught that her body was broken and her existence was a burden. She clung to him and cried, and Ethan held her, his own eyes red, his throat tight. Rose watched from the doorway. Beside her, William stood silent. But his hand found hers, and he squeezed once gently, and she knew he understood. This man was different. This man saw their pain and tried to fix it, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. 2 weeks passed, good weeks, quiet weeks, weeks where bellies were full and nights were warm and no one raised a hand in anger. The children began to relax, to laugh occasionally, to forget for hours at a time that the world was a cruel place. And then Victor Sterling's letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by a rider from town. The envelope was official, sealed with wax, addressed to Ethan Cole. He opened it standing on the porch while the children played in the snow behind him. The letter was from Sterling's lawyer. It claimed that the transaction at the auction had been for labor services, not full custody. It stated that the children remained legal wards of Sterling home. It demanded their return within 7 days or legal action would be taken. Ethan read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. He did not tell the children. Not yet. There was no point in frightening them until he knew what could be done. Instead, he saddled his horse and rode to town. Sheriff Jacob Tate sat behind his desk when Ethan arrived, feet up, reading a week-old newspaper. He looked up when Ethan entered, saw the expression on his face, and put the paper down. "Problem?" Jacob asked. Ethan handed him the letter. Jacob read it, swore softly, read it again. "Sterling is claiming you bought labor rights, not custody rights. I bought children. I gave them a home. You bought children at an auction. That is not exactly standard adoption procedure." Ethan felt cold settle in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I am saying Sterling has lawyers, good ones, and he has a point legally speaking. You did not go through proper channels. You did not file with the territory. You just showed up with $50 and took 5 kids home. Would you rather I left them there to be sold off to farmers who would work them to death? What I would rather does not matter. What the law says matters, and the law says Sterling might have a case." Ethan leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "Those children have been with me 2 weeks. They are happy. They are healthy. They are learning. They have a home. You cannot tell me the law wants to send them back to that man." Jacob sighed. "The law does not care about happy. The law cares about legal, and legally this is murky." "Then what do I do?" "You get a judge to rule in your favor. Prove you can care for them. Prove Sterling is unfit. Make a case that the children are better off with you. When circuit judge comes through in 2 weeks, Judge Morrison. He is fair. If you can convince him, you have a chance. 2 weeks. 14 days to gather evidence, to prepare, to somehow prove to a stranger that these 5 broken children belonged with a man they had known for less than a month. Ethan rode home slowly. The sun was setting, painting the snow orange and pink. Beautiful, peaceful, temporary. At the ranch, the children were waiting for him. They saw his face and knew immediately that something was wrong. Rose stepped forward. "What happened?" Ethan dismounted, tied his horse, looked at them, these 5 souls who had started to trust him, who had started to believe that maybe the world had one good thing in it after all. "Sterling wants you back," he said. "He has lawyers. He is claiming I do not have legal custody." The words landed like stones. Lucy's face crumpled. Daniel's fists clenched. Esther's slate fell from her hands. William moved closer to Rose, pressing against her side. "There will be a hearing," Ethan continued. "In 2 weeks. A judge will decide. If we can prove you are better off here, you stay. If not—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Rose's voice was steady, but her eyes were too bright. "Will we have to go back? Not if I can help it. How can you help it? You are just one man. Sterling has money, lawyers, the law." Ethan knelt down so he was eye level with her. "The law also has judges, and judges are people, and people can be convinced. We have 2 weeks to show that you belong here, that this is your home, that I am not perfect, but I am trying, and that has to count for something." Daniel spoke, his voice hard. "And if it does not count, if the judge says we have to go back," Ethan looked at him, "at all of them, then I will find another way. I promised you a home. I meant it." That night they sat by the fire. No one spoke much. The weight of Sterling's threat hung over them like storm clouds. Eventually Lucy fell asleep in Ethan's lap. William leaned against Rose. Esther wrote on her slate, then showed it to Ethan. "Will you really fight for us?" it asked. Ethan took the slate, wrote his response carefully. "Yes, with everything I have." Esther nodded, took the slate back, wrote again. Why Ethan looked at the 5 of them. These children who had been sold like livestock, who had been starved and beaten and told they were worthless, who had somehow against all odds survived with their capacity for trust still intact. He thought of Sarah, of the children she had wanted, of the house full of laughter and chaos and love that she had dreamed of. "Because," he said quietly, "you are worth fighting for." It was not a complicated answer. It was not eloquent, but it was true. And in that moment, sitting by the fire with 5 children who were learning to believe in him, Ethan felt something he had not felt since Sarah died. Purpose. The next 2 weeks would be hard. The hearing would be harder. Sterling would bring lawyers and arguments and the full weight of institutional authority. But Ethan had something Sterling did not. He had 5 children who wanted to stay, who would stand in front of a judge and speak truth, who would prove by their very presence that love mattered more than law, that home was not a legal document, but a choice made every day. The fire crackled. The children slept or dozed or simply sat in silence. Outside, the Wyoming winter howled. And inside, a family that had not existed 3 weeks ago prepared to fight for the right to remain together. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight they had each other. And for now, that was enough. The days before the hearing moved with the strange quality of a dream tilting toward nightmare. The children tried to maintain normalcy, to pretend that the weight of an uncertain future was not pressing down on all of them. But fear has a way of leaking through even the strongest facades. Rose took to waking in the middle of the night, checking on her siblings, counting them like a miser counting coins. 1, 2, 3, 4. All still there, all still breathing, all still hers for another day. Daniel worked himself to exhaustion during daylight hours, chopping wood until his hands blistered mucking stalls, until his back ached, as if by proving his usefulness he could somehow guarantee his place. At night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering other places he had been sent away, from other promises that had turned to ash. Lucy clung to her special shoes like talismans. She wore them constantly, even to bed, terrified that if she took them off, they would disappear, and with them, the man who had cared enough to make them. Esther wrote less. Her slate stayed mostly blank, her enormous eyes following Ethan wherever he went, as if she could keep him solid and real through the sheer force of her attention. And silent William began having nightmares. He would wake screaming without sound, his mouth open in a perfect circle of terror, no noise emerging. Rose would hold him until the shaking stopped, until his eyes focused again, until he remembered where he was. Safe. For now. But for how long Ethan saw all of this, carried the weight of it. He had made them a promise, and now that promise was being tested by forces beyond his control. The law. Money. Men in suits who had never met these children and did not care whether they lived or died, only whether the paperwork was filed correctly. He rode to town every other day, consulting with Sheriff Jacob, trying to understand what the hearing would entail, what evidence would matter, what arguments might sway a judge who had seen 1,000 cases and had no particular reason to care about this one. "You need character witnesses," Jacob said. "People who can testify that you are fit to raise children, that the children are better off with you than at Sterling's orphanage." "Who would do that? I barely know anyone in this town anymore. I have been living like a hermit for 5 years. Jacob leaned back in his chair. "There is Dr. Wade. He is well respected. If he examines the children and testifies they are healthy and well cared for, that carries weight. Anyone else? Margaret Porter runs the general store. She has been in Redemption Creek 40 years. Everyone knows her. If she speaks for you, people listen." Ethan remembered Mrs. Porter, a severe woman with opinions on everything and charity for very little. She had looked at him with disapproval when he first brought the children to town, buying them new clothes and supplies. Her expression had said clearly what she thought of a single man taking in 5 orphans. Nothing good, that expression suggested, nothing proper. "She will not help me," Ethan said. "Then convince her you have less than 2 weeks." That afternoon, Ethan took the children to town. They needed to be seen, to be known. to become real in the eyes of the community instead of abstract problems on a legal document. They walked down the main street together, Ethan in front, the 5 children following like ducklings. People stopped and stared. Some nodded, some whispered. Most simply watched with the careful neutrality of those who had not yet decided which side of a controversy to support. At the general store, Mrs. Margaret Porter stood behind the counter, 60 years old and hard as Wyoming granite. She saw them enter, and her mouth thinned to a line. "Mr. Cole," she said. Her tone was not warm. "Mrs. Porter, we need supplies, fabric for new clothes. The children are growing." She looked at the children. Her gaze lingered on each in turn. Rose standing straight despite her fear. Daniel trying to appear older than his 12 years. Lucy in her special shoes. Esther with her slate. William holding Rose's hand silent as death. "Growing children need more than fabric," Mrs. Porter said. "They need stability, structure, a proper home. They have a home. Do they? Or do they have a temporary arrangement that will end badly?" The children heard this. Lucy's lower lip trembled. Daniel's jaw clenched. Rose put a protective arm around William. Ethan kept his voice level. "They have me, and I have them. That is not temporary." Mrs. Porter came around the counter. She walked to Lucy, knelt down with some difficulty, her old knees protesting. She looked at the child's shoes, at the careful construction, the way the left sole was built up to compensate for the shorter leg. "Who made these?" she asked. "I did," Ethan said. "You are a cobbler now. I am whatever they need me to be." Mrs. Porter stood. She looked at Ethan for a long moment. Then she began gathering fabric from the shelves. Sturdy cotton for shirts, warm wool for winter dresses, thread, buttons, more than Ethan had asked for. "You will need this too," she said, adding a bolt of calico. "Growing girls need something pretty now and then, not just practical." Ethan blinked. "Mrs. Porter, do not thank me yet. I have not decided if you are a fool or a saint. But those children are clean, fed. The little one has good shoes. That counts for something." She wrapped the fabric, tallied the cost, accepted Ethan's payment. As they turned to leave, she spoke again. "Mr. Cole, the hearing is in 10 days, yes?" "Yes, ma'am." "I will be there. To testify against me." Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. "To testify about what I see. What I see will depend on what you show me over the next 10 days. Do not disappoint me." They left the store. Rose looked up at Ethan. "Is she going to help us? I do not know, but she is paying attention. That is something." The next person they visited was Dr. Augustus Wade. He was older than Ethan, perhaps 58, with the careful movements of a man whose body had started to betray him, but whose mind remained sharp. His office smelled of carbolic and old paper. "I heard you took in the Sterling orphans," Wade said, gesturing them inside. "That was either very brave or very foolish." "I have not determined which yet." Wade examined each child in turn. He checked their teeth, their eyes, their weight. He made notes in a leather journal. When he got to the burn scars on Rose's arm, old marks from Sterling's discipline, he paused. "How did you get these?" he asked gently. Rose hesitated. Ethan nodded to her. Truth was their only weapon. "Mr. Sterling burned me with a poker. I talked back." Wade's expression did not change, but his hand tightened on his pen. He documented the scars carefully, moved on to Daniel, who had bruises from old beatings that had never quite faded, to William, whose silence he noted with concern, to Lucy's leg, to Esther's underweight frame. When he finished, he sat at his desk and wrote for several minutes. Then he looked up. "These children were neglected at Sterling's facility, possibly abused. They have gained weight since coming to you. Their color is better. The psychological trauma will take longer to address, but physically they are improving. Will you testify to that?" Wade met his eyes. "I will testify to what I have observed. I will also testify that Victor Sterling has run that orphanage for 20 years, and in that time I have treated broken bones, burns, and malnutrition in children who should have been protected. Whether that sways the judge is not my concern, but the truth should be spoken. Thank you. Do not thank me. Just keep doing what you are doing. Those children need consistency. They need to know the world is not entirely made of men like Sterling. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, the sky began to darken, not with the natural darkness of sunset, but with clouds rolling in from the north, heavy and pregnant with snow. "Storm coming," Daniel observed. "Yes," Ethan agreed. "A bad one by the look of it." They made it home just as the first flakes began to fall. By nightfall, the storm was a roaring beast wind howling around the house, snow piling against the windows in great drifts. The children gathered around the fire. Ethan made stew from the last of the venison, thick and rich with potatoes and carrots. They ate together the storm, a constant presence just beyond the walls, a reminder that nature cared nothing for human concerns. After dinner, Daniel helped Ethan secure the barn. They checked on the horses, made sure the chickens were protected, that nothing would blow away in the wind. As they worked, Daniel spoke. "If the judge says we have to go back, I will run away." Ethan stopped. "Where would you go?" "I do not know. Anywhere. But I will not go back to Sterling. I will die first." The boy meant it. Ethan could hear it in his voice, the absolute conviction. "It will not come to that." "You cannot promise that. You are just one man. Sterling has money and lawyers and the law. The law also has judges, and judges are human. They can be swayed." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "By what?" "By the fact that you feed us, by pretty speeches. Sterling will tell them we are defective, broken, that we belong in an institution, and they will believe him because he is respectable, and you are just some rancher who bought children on a whim." "I did not buy you on a whim." "Then why? Why us? Why 5 broken children you did not know?" Ethan looked at this angry, frightened boy who had been taught that trust was weakness and love was a trap. "Because my wife wanted 5 children. Because I saw your sister offer herself to save her brother. Because I was dying inside and you gave me a reason to live. Pick whichever answer you like. They are all true." Daniel stared at him. The wind howled, the snow fell, and slowly something in the boy's face shifted. "I am scared," he admitted. "I have never had anything worth losing before. Now I do, and I am terrified." "Me too," Ethan said. "Every single day." They finished their work in silence. When they returned to the house, they found Rose at the window, looking out at the storm. "Cannot see anything," she said. "Just white. That is how Wyoming winters are. You wait them out. Morning always comes. Does it? Or do some storms just keep going until everything is buried?" Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. "Everything ends, Rose. Even storms, even bad times. You just have to hold on long enough to see the other side." She turned to look at him. "What if we do not make it to the other side? What if the judge sends us back? Then I will appeal, and if the appeal fails, I will petition the territorial governor. And if that fails, I will find another way. I made you a promise. I will keep it." People break promises all the time. I am not people. I am me, and I do not break my word. Rose wanted to believe him. She wanted it with an intensity that frightened her. Because if she let herself believe, and he proved false, it would destroy something in her that could never be repaired. William appeared at her side. He had been drawing again pictures with the pencils Ethan had bought him. He held up the latest sketch. It showed 6 figures, 5, small one large. They stood in front of a house. Above them a woman with kind eyes watched from a cloud. Ethan took the drawing. His throat tightened. "Is this us?" William nodded. "And that is Sarah watching over us." Another nod. "It is beautiful, thank you." William smiled. Just a small thing, barely visible. But it was there. And seeing it, Ethan felt something break open in his chest. Not with pain, with hope. The storm raged for 3 days. They were trapped inside the world beyond the windows, invisible behind curtains of snow. But inside they were warm. They played games, read books, told stories. Daniel taught Lucy to play checkers. Esther drew elaborate pictures on her slate. Rose helped Ethan cook, learning his mother's recipe for bread. And William, on the third day, did something extraordinary. They were sitting by the fire. Ethan was carving a piece of wood, making a toy horse for Lucy. William sat beside him, watching. And then, very softly, so softly that at first Ethan thought he imagined it, William hummed just a few notes, a fragment of a melody. But it was sound, intentional sound, communication. Ethan froze. Rose's head snapped up. Daniel stopped mid-move in his checker game. Everyone stared at William. The boy looked around at all of them, fear flickering across his face. He had broken his silence. Would they punish him for it? Mock him? That was beautiful, Ethan said quietly. Can you hum it again? William hesitated. Then he hummed the melody again, a little louder this time. It was a lullaby, something his mother used to sing. Rose's eyes filled with tears. She crossed the room and hugged her brother. You remembered. Mama's song. You remembered. William nodded against her shoulder. He did not speak. But the humming was a start. A crack in the wall he had built around himself. A sign that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. On the fourth day, the storm broke. The sun emerged pale and cold, revealing a world transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep in places sculpted by wind into strange shapes. The ranch was an island in a white sea. Ethan and Daniel dug paths from the house to the barn, from the barn to the chicken coop. And it took hours, but the work felt good, felt purposeful, felt like building something instead of waiting for something to be taken away. That night, as they sat around the fire again, exhausted and satisfied, Rose spoke the question that had been growing in all of them. What happens at the hearing? Ethan set down the piece he was carving. The judge listens to both sides. Sterling's lawyer will argue that I do not have legal custody, that the children belong to the orphanage. I will argue that you are better off here. Who decides? Judge Morrison. I am told he is fair. Fair does not mean good. Fair just means he follows the rules, and the rules might not be on our side. Then we change his mind. We show him that rules written for one situation do not fit another. We make him see you as children, not as property to be distributed according to law. Daniel leaned forward. What if that does not work? What if he sees us as property anyway? Ethan looked at each of them in turn. Then we find another path. But I will not let you go back to Sterling. That is not a question. That is a fact. Even if it means breaking the law, Rose asked. Even then. It was a dangerous thing to say, a promise that could cost him everything. But looking at these 5 children who had been sold and beaten and starved, who had somehow found the courage to trust one more time, Ethan knew he meant it. The law was supposed to protect the innocent. But when the law failed, when it became a weapon wielded by the cruel against the helpless, then the law itself became the enemy. He would not let them be taken, not while he still drew breath. The days marched forward. 10 days became 7. 7 became 5. The hearing loomed like a cliff edge. They were all walking toward, unable to stop, unable to turn back. They prepared as best they could. Ethan rehearsed what he would say, how he would argue, what evidence he would present. The children practiced telling their stories, speaking truth even when it hurt, showing the judge their scars and their healing in equal measure. On the 6th night before the hearing, Ethan could not sleep. He walked out to Sarah's grave, a small plot under an oak tree marked with a simple stone. The snow had been cleared away, the ground frozen hard. He knelt beside the grave, spoke to the woman who was not there to answer. On the 6th night before the hearing, Ethan could not sleep. He sat by the dying fire, Sarah's photograph in his hands. The image was faded now, the edges worn from years of holding, but her smile remained clear, kind, hopeful. He spoke to the photograph as if she could hear. Tomorrow changes everything. Either we become a real family in the eyes of the law, or I lose them. And Sarah, I cannot lose them. Not after, his voice broke. He pressed the photograph to his chest. Help me find the right words. Help me show the judge what you already knew, that love is enough, that it has to be enough. The fire crackled. Outside, snow began to fall again. And in the silence, Ethan felt something he had not felt in years. Not certainty, but the quiet strength that comes from knowing you are fighting for something worth losing everything for. The wind whispered through the bare branches. The stars watched with their cold, distant light. But I am going to try, for you, for them, for the children you wanted. I am going to walk into that courtroom, and I am going to fight. And if I lose, I will keep fighting. I will not stop. I will not give up, because they deserve more than this world has given them. They deserve a chance. He stood, brushed snow from his knees, looked up at the stars one more time. Help me, he whispered. Please, help me save them. The stars, as always, remained silent. But somewhere in that silence, Ethan found what he needed. Not certainty, not confidence, just the determination to face what was coming, whatever the cost. He walked back to the house. Inside, 5 children slept. Tomorrow they would wake, and the countdown would continue. 5 days, 4, 3, until the moment when everything would be decided. Until they learned whether hope was enough to stand against the weight of law and money and institutional power. Until they discovered whether broken things could truly be made whole, or whether some damage was too deep, too permanent, too absolute to ever heal. The night deepened, the cold intensified, and in the house on the Wyoming ranch a family that should not have existed prepared to fight for the right to remain together. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold, the kind of Wyoming winter day where the sky was so blue it hurt to look at, and the air was sharp enough to cut. Ethan woke before sunrise, his stomach twisted into knots that no amount of coffee could loosen. He dressed carefully, his best shirt clean but showing its age, his good jacket the one Sarah had helped him pick out years ago for occasions that mattered. His hands shook as he buttoned it. He forced them still. In the children's rooms, 5 souls were already awake. They had dressed in the new clothes Mrs. Porter had sold them, simple but clean, the kind of outfits that said these children were cared for, valued, loved. Rose had braided Lucy's hair. Daniel had polished everyone's shoes, even his own, until they gleamed. Esther clutched her slate like a shield. William stood close to Rose, his hand finding hers. They gathered in the kitchen. No one ate much. Breakfast was an obligation they went through mechanically, forcing down bread and butter, drinking water because their mouths were too dry for anything else. Remember, Ethan said as they prepared to leave, tell the truth. Do not exaggerate. Do not perform. Just speak what you know. The judge needs to see you as you are. That is enough. What if it is not enough? Lucy asked, her voice small. Ethan knelt in front of her. Then we try something else. But today we tell the truth, and we hope that truth matters. The ride to town took an hour. The wagon wheels crunched through frozen snow. No one spoke. The silence was heavy with all the things they could not say, all the fears they could not voice. Redemption. Creek's courthouse was a simple building, wood frame, 2 stories with a bell tower that had not held a bell in 15 years. People were already gathering when they arrived. Townspeople who had nothing better to do than watch their neighbors' lives fall apart or come together. Curiosity seekers, gossips, a few who might actually care about the outcome. Sheriff Jacob met them on the steps. Judge Morrison arrived last night. He is already inside. Sterling is here with his lawyer, a man named Caldwell from Virginia City. Professional. Expensive. And we have nothing, Ethan said. You have the truth. Sometimes that is enough. They entered the courtroom. It was larger than Ethan had expected, with wooden benches arranged in rows facing a raised platform where the judge would sit. On one side of the room, Victor Sterling waited with his lawyer. Sterling wore a suit that probably cost more than Ethan made in 6 months. His face was composed, confident. He looked like a man who knew he had already won. Beside him, lawyer Caldwell reviewed papers, his movements precise and practiced. He glanced up as Ethan and the children entered, assessed them with the cold calculation of a man evaluating livestock, then returned to his documents. On the other side of the room, Ethan and the children took their seats. The wooden bench was hard. The room smelled of old paper and wood smoke and human sweat. Windows let in pale winter light that did nothing to warm the space. People filled in behind them. Mrs. Porter arrived, taking a seat 3 rows back. Dr. Wade entered, nodded to Ethan, sat near the front. Other townspeople Ethan barely knew. Some he did not know at all. They whispered to each other, speculating, judging, deciding the outcome, before a single word had been spoken. At precisely 9 o'clock, a door at the front of the room opened. Judge Morrison entered. He was 62 years old, with silver hair and a face carved by 3 decades of hearing people lie, cheat, and occasionally tell the truth. His eyes were sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. His robes were black and well worn. He carried himself with the authority of a man who had sent both innocent and guilty to their fates and had learned to sleep at night regardless. "All rise," the bailiff called. Everyone stood. The judge took his seat, gestured for them to sit, opened a folder on his desk. "Case number 47, he read. "Sterling Home for Orphans versus Ethan Cole. Matter of custody regarding 5 minor children." He looked up. "Is the plaintiff present?" Sterling's lawyer stood. "Lawrence Caldwell, representing Victor Sterling and Sterling Home for Orphans, Your Honor." "And the defendant," Ethan stood. "Ethan Cole, Your Honor, representing myself." Judge Morrison's eyebrow rose fractionally. "You have no legal counsel." "No, sir. I have the truth, and I have these children. I hope that will be sufficient." "Hope is not a legal strategy, Mr. Cole, but we will proceed. Mr. Caldwell, your opening statement." Caldwell stood smooth and polished, every inch the professional advocate. His voice carried the practiced resonance of someone trained to persuade. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Victor Sterling operates a licensed facility for orphaned children. He has done so for 20 years with an unblemished record. 3 weeks ago, Mr. Cole attended a public auction where Mr. Sterling was seeking work placements for 5 children in his care. Mr. Cole paid $50. However, and this is crucial, the transaction was for labor services, not custody transfer. The children remain legal wards of Sterling Home." He paused, letting this sink in. Mr. Cole, a single man with no experience raising children, no legal authority, no proper documentation, simply took 5 vulnerable minors to his ranch. He has kept them there without oversight, without approval, without following any of the proper territorial procedures for adoption or guardianship. Sterling Home now requests the immediate return of these children to proper institutional care. Caldwell sat. Sterling nodded approvingly. The courtroom murmured. Judge Morrison looked at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, your response." Ethan stood. He had no training in law, no experience with courtroom procedure, but he knew how to speak truth. That would have to be enough. "Your Honor, I did not buy labor services. I bought children who were being sold like livestock. 5 children who were starving, beaten, treated as burdens instead of human beings. I gave them a home. I give them food. I give them safety. They are thriving. That should matter more than paperwork. Should and does are different things, Mr. Cole. The law requires documentation for a reason. The law also requires that children be protected. Sterling was not protecting them. He was profiting from them. That is an accusation. Do you have proof?" Ethan hesitated. He had the children's testimony, their scars, their stories. But proof in the legal sense, documents, official records. "I have the children themselves, Your Honor. Look at them. Ask them. They will tell you what Sterling's care consisted of." Judge Morrison studied the 5 children sitting in the front row. Rose met his gaze steadily. Daniel stared at the floor. Lucy trembled. Esther watched with those enormous eyes. William pressed close to his sister, silent as always. "We will hear from witnesses," the judge said. "Mr. Caldwell, call your first." The plaintiff calls Victor Sterling. Sterling rose, walked to the witness chair with the bearing of a man accustomed to respect. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat. Caldwell approached. "Mr. Sterling, how long have you operated Sterling Home for Orphans?" 20 years this spring. "And in that time, how many children have you cared for?" "Over 300. A murmur in the courtroom. 300 children. That was significant. "Can you describe the conditions at your facility?" "Clean dormitories, regular meals, education in reading, writing, arithmetic, and scripture. We teach the children valuable skills, prepare them for productive lives." "And the 5 children in question, why were they at the auction?" Sterling's expression became pain, the face of a man doing difficult but necessary work. "Those 5 have special challenges. Rose Hayes and her brother William lost their parents in a fire. The trauma left the boy mute. Rose became defiant, difficult to manage. Lucy Carter has a deformity, a shortened leg, which limits her usefulness in most placements. Daniel Foster has a history of theft. Esther Klein refuses to speak. I sought work placements where they might contribute despite their limitations. Work placements, not sales. Of course not. The auction was for labor contracts, room and board in exchange for work. Standard practice for difficult-to-place orphans. It sounded reasonable, charitable even. Sterling made himself sound like a man trying to help troubled children, not a man who had starved and beaten them. Ethan's hands clenched. Rose's jaw tightened. But this was Sterling's moment. They would have their turn. Caldwell continued. "When Mr. Cole took these children, did you attempt to contact him to ensure proper procedures were followed?" "I wrote immediately. Explained that custody had not been transferred, only labor rights. I asked for the children's return so we could process proper adoption paperwork if Mr. Cole wished to pursue that avenue. He refused. He has kept them without authority for nearly a month now." "In your professional opinion, are these children in danger with Mr. Cole?" "I cannot say. I know nothing of his character, his fitness, his ability to provide appropriate structure and discipline. That is precisely the problem. He bypassed every safeguard designed to protect vulnerable children." Caldwell nodded, satisfied. "No further questions." Judge Morrison looked at Ethan. "Your witness, Mr. Cole." Ethan stood, approached Sterling. The man looked at him with barely concealed contempt. "You said the children were well fed at your facility?" "Yes." "Then why had Daniel Foster never been full in his entire life until I fed him?" Sterling's smile was patient. "Young boys exaggerate. They are always hungry." "You said they were educated. Can any of them read above a primer level?" "Education takes time. Some children are slow learners." "You said Rose was defiant. Can you tell the court how you disciplined her?" "Standard methods, restriction of privileges, additional chores." Ethan felt heat rising in his chest. "You never burned her with a poker for talking back." "Absolutely not. If the girl has burn scars, they predate her time with me, perhaps from the fire that killed her parents." It was a lie. A smooth, practiced, utterly convincing lie. And without proof, without witnesses, it was Sterling's word against a traumatized child's. Ethan tried another approach. "Why were you selling them if they were so well cared for? Why not keep them until they aged out? Resources are limited. Younger children need those beds. Finding work placements for older children is responsible stewardship." Every answer was reasonable, every explanation plausible. Sterling had done this before, Ethan realized. He knew how to present abuse as care neglect, as efficiency, cruelty as pragmatism. "No further questions," Ethan said, returning to his seat. He felt defeated. Sterling had won this round simply by being a better liar. Judge Morrison called a brief recess. People stood stretched, whispered. Ethan gathered the children close. "He is lying," Rose said, her voice tight with anger. "Everything he said was a lie." "I know, but we need to prove it." "How?" "With the truth. When you testify, tell exactly what happened. Make the judge see Sterling for what he is." After the recess, Dr. Wade took the stand. He was sworn in, seated himself carefully. Caldwell approached. "Dr. Wade, you examined these children recently?" "Yes, 10 days ago." "And your findings?" "They are healthy, well-nourished. Physically, they show signs of good care." Caldwell smiled. "So Mr. Cole has been providing adequate physical care?" "Yes." "Could these children receive equally good physical care at Sterling Home?" Wade hesitated. "In theory, yes." "Thank you, Doctor. No further questions." But Ethan stood before Wade could leave the stand. "Doctor, you said in theory they could receive good care at Sterling. Did they actually receive good care there?" Wade met his eyes. "No. When I examined them, I found evidence of chronic malnutrition, old bruises. Rose Hayes has burn scars consistent with deliberate infliction, not accident." "Did you document this?" "Yes, in my medical journal." Ethan felt a surge of hope. "May I see that journal?" Wade pulled a leather-bound book from his coat, handed it to Ethan. Ethan opened it, found the relevant pages, showed them to the judge. "Your Honor, these notes document abuse, starvation, burns, beatings." Judge Morrison read the entries carefully. His expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, do you wish to challenge this evidence?" Caldwell stood. "Medical notes are subject to interpretation, Your Honor. Dr. Wade may have misunderstood the origins of these old injuries." "I did not misunderstand," Wade said firmly. "I have been a physician for 30 years. I know the difference between accidental injury and deliberate harm." The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison closed the journal, handed it back to Wade. "You may step down, Doctor." The next witness was Mrs. Porter. She took the stand with the bearing of a woman who feared neither God nor judge. Caldwell tried to discredit her. "Mrs. Porter, you have only observed Mr. Cole with these children for a few weeks. Is that correct?" "That is correct." "Can you really speak to his fitness as a parent based on such limited acquaintance?" "I can speak to what I see. I see children who were ragged and afraid become clean and confident. I see a man who made shoes for a crippled girl so she could walk without pain. I see a family forming from nothing. That is what I see." But surely a proper institution with trained staff and structured programs would be better for troubled children than one untrained man. Mrs. Porter's eyes blazed. "I have lived in this territory for 40 years, young man. I have seen many things. I have seen institutions crush the life out of children in the name of helping them. And I have seen individual human beings love broken children back to wholeness. Mr. Cole is doing the latter. Sterling was doing the former. That is all I need to know." Caldwell tried again, but Mrs. Porter was immovable. She spoke her truth, and no amount of legal maneuvering could shake it. Finally, the moment arrived. Judge Morrison looked at Rose. "Young lady, would you come forward, please?" Rose stood, walked to the witness chair. Her legs trembled, but her spine was straight. She placed her small hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The courtroom watched this 10-year-old girl who had been sold like cattle and who now held the power to determine her own fate. Judge Morrison's voice gentled. "What is your name, child?" "Rose Hayes, sir." "Rose, I need you to tell me about your time at Sterling Home. In your own words. Take your time." Rose looked at Sterling. He stared back his expression, promising consequences if she spoke. She looked at Ethan. He nodded. "Trust the truth," his eyes said. "It is all we have." Rose began to speak. Rose Hayes stood before the courtroom, her small hand still resting on the Bible, where she had sworn to tell the truth. Judge Morrison watched her with the careful attention of a man who had learned to read between words to hear what was spoken and what remained locked in silence. "Rose," the judge said gently, Tell me about your time at Sterling Home, in your own words. Take as much time as you need." Rose looked at Victor Sterling. He sat rigid in his chair, his eyes promising retribution if she spoke. She looked at his lawyer Caldwell, who watched her with the clinical detachment of a man evaluating whether she would be useful or problematic. Then she looked at Ethan, at this man who had fed her when she was starving, who had taught her to shoot so she could protect herself, who had built shoes for Lucy and held Daniel when he cried, and never once raised his hand in anger. Ethan nodded. One small movement. Trust the truth, his eyes said. It is all we have. Rose took a breath, let it out slowly, began to speak. 8 months ago, my parents died in a fire. Our house burned down with them inside. My brother William and I watched it happen. We heard them screaming. There was nothing we could do. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her dress. Mr. Sterling came the next day. He said we were orphans now. He said the territory would pay him to take care of us. He brought us to his home. It was not like a home. It was cold. There were 30 children in 3 rooms. We slept on the floor, 4 blankets for all of us. In winter we could see our breath inside. Judge Morrison made a note. Go on. The food was thin soup, bread that was mostly air. Sometimes there was meat, but only the oldest boys got it. The little ones, like Lucy, they stayed hungry. When we asked for more, Mr. Sterling said we were ungrateful. He said charity was not supposed to be comfortable. He said we should work harder if we wanted to eat. What kind of work? The judge asked. Cleaning, laundry, chopping wood. The boys worked in the barn. The girls worked in the kitchen. We worked from sunrise until dark. If we worked too slow or made mistakes, Mr. Sterling would discipline us. How did he discipline you? Rose's hand moved unconsciously to her right arm, to the scars hidden beneath her sleeve. Different ways. Sometimes he locked us in the cellar. Sometimes he withheld food for days. Sometimes he used his hands. And sometimes he used fire. The courtroom went absolutely still. Even the people in the back rows stopped shuffling. Fire, Judge Morrison repeated. Rose unbuttoned her sleeve, rolled it up slowly, revealed the burn scars that Dr. Wade had documented. 4 finger marks and a thumb perfectly preserved in damaged skin where someone had gripped her arm and held it against something hot. A woman in the gallery gasped. Mrs. Porter's hand went to her mouth. Dr. Wade leaned forward, his expression grim. I talked back, Rose said simply. I told Mr. Sterling that the soup was not enough to keep the little ones alive. He said I was insolent. He grabbed my arm and held it on the stove until I stopped screaming. Then he said if I ever spoke against him again, he would do the same to William. Sterling shot to his feet. That is a lie. Your Honor, the girl is disturbed. These burns are from the fire that killed her parents. She is confused, traumatized, inventing stories. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, Judge Morrison said coldly. You will have your opportunity to respond. Right now, I am listening to this child. Sterling sat, but his face was purple with rage. The judge turned back to Rose. Did you report this to anyone? The sheriff, a doctor, any adult? Who would I tell Mr. Sterling owned the orphanage? The territory paid him. The sheriff came once a month, and Mr. Sterling showed him the clean room, the one we scrubbed before inspections. He never saw the cellar or the room where we really slept, and we were told that if we complained, we would be sent somewhere worse, or we would disappear and no one would ask questions because we were just orphans. Nobody cared about orphans. Her voice broke on the last word, not with tears, with something harder. With the accumulated weight of months of understanding that she was worthless in the eyes of the world, that her life mattered only as much as the stipend the territory paid for her care. But then the auction came, she continued. Mr. Sterling said he needed to make room for younger children. He said some of us were too old, too damaged, too expensive to keep. He lined us up and sold us, like horses, like furniture, to whoever would pay. And that is when Mr. Cole bought you Yes, a man bid on me alone. He wanted a kitchen worker. He did not want William because William does not speak. He has not spoken since the fire. So I told the man to take William instead of me. I told him my brother was worth more. I thought maybe if someone took William, at least he would be safe. I was ready to go back to Sterling alone. Rose looked at Ethan. Her eyes were bright, but her voice remained steady. But Mr. Cole said no. He paid $50 for all 5 of us. He took us home. He gave us beds, real beds with blankets. He gave us food. So much food we did not know what to do with it. He gave us kindness. He never hit us, never locked us up, never hurt us. He taught us things. He made Lucy shoes so her leg would not hurt. He let Daniel steal bread and did not punish him because he understood we needed to feel safe before we could trust. She paused, drew breath. Mr. Cole is not perfect. He burns pancakes and he does not know how to braid hair, and sometimes he does not know what to say when we are sad. But he tries. Every single day he tries. And that is more than anyone else ever did for us. Judge Morrison wrote for several moments. Then he looked up. Rose, I have one more question. If I rule that you must return to Mr. Sterling's care, what would you do? Rose's answer came without hesitation. I would run away. I would take William, and we would walk into the desert again. I would rather die free than live in that place. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison banged his gavel once. Silence returned. Thank you, Rose. You may step down. Rose walked back to her seat on shaking legs. Ethan stood as she approached, and without thinking, without asking permission, she walked into his arms and let him hold her. Just for a moment. Just long enough to remember that she was not alone anymore. Caldwell stood. Your Honor, with respect, we have just heard the testimony of a traumatized child who has been influenced by Mr. Cole. Her story is emotional but unverifiable. Burns could come from many sources. Hunger is subjective. She may believe what she is saying, but belief and truth are not always the same thing. Are you suggesting she is lying? I am suggesting she is confused. She has been with Mr. Cole for weeks. He has fed her, clothed her, provided comfort. She is grateful. Gratitude can color memory, can make the past seem worse than it was, and the present better than it is. Judge Morrison looked at Rose sitting now between Ethan and her siblings. She did not seem confused to me. She seemed remarkably clear. Children are impressionable. Your Honor, they can be coached. Are you accusing Mr. Cole of coaching these children to lie? Caldwell hesitated. It was a dangerous accusation to make without proof. I am saying we should be cautious about accepting the word of a 10-year-old girl against a man who has run a licensed institution for 2 decades. Before the judge could respond, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. The door burst open. Sheriff Jacob Tate entered, his face grim. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation. What kind of situation, Sheriff? The youngest Hayes boy, William, he is missing. The words hit like a physical blow. Rose went white. Ethan stood so fast his chair toppled backward. Missing? Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. What do you mean missing? He was with the other children in the hallway during the recess. One of my deputies was watching them. He turned away for a moment, and when he looked back, the boy was gone. We have searched the courthouse. He is not here. Rose grabbed Ethan's arm. Sterling took him. He took William. All eyes turned to Sterling. He remained seated, his expression carefully neutral. I have been in this courtroom the entire time. How could I have taken anyone? Not you, Rose said, her voice rising. Your men, the ones you hire to do your dirty work. Jacob stepped forward. Mr. Sterling, I need to ask you directly. Do you know where William Hayes is? I have no idea. Perhaps the boy simply wandered off. He is mute and traumatized. Who knows what goes through his mind? But Rose saw it, a flicker in Sterling's eyes, a tiny, satisfied smile that appeared and vanished in less than a second. He had done this, or ordered it done. He was reminding them all that he still had power, that he could reach out and take what he wanted, that crossing him had consequences. Ethan saw it too. He moved toward Sterling with the deadly purpose of a man who had killed before and would do so again without hesitation. Jacob stepped between them. "Cole, no. Not here. Not like this. He took my son. We do not know that. I know it. Look at his face. He knows exactly where William is." Judge Morrison's gavel came down like thunder. "Order everyone sit down. Sheriff, organize a search party immediately. Mr. Sterling, if you have any information about this boy's whereabouts, I strongly suggest you share it now." Sterling spread his hands in a gesture of false innocence. "Your Honor, I am as concerned as anyone, but I cannot help with information I do not possess." The courtroom dissolved into chaos. People were standing talking, moving toward the doors to join the search. Rose was crying now, really crying, the kind of tears that come from absolute terror. Lucy clung to Daniel. Esther's slate fell from her hands and shattered on the floor. Ethan knelt in front of Rose, gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. I will find him. I promise you I will find him." "What if Sterling hurts him? What if he—" "I will not let that happen. Do you trust me?" Rose nodded through her tears. "Yes." "Then trust me now. Stay here with Sheriff Tate. Keep your brother and sisters safe. I am going to bring William home." He stood, turned to Jacob. "Which direction?" "We do not know. He could be anywhere." "No. Sterling would not risk keeping him close to town. Too many witnesses. He would take him somewhere isolated, somewhere he has control." Dr. Wade pushed through the crowd. "Sterling has a cabin, 15 miles north. He uses it for hunting. If I were hiding a child, that is where I would go." Ethan was already moving toward the door. Jacob followed, calling for deputies. Mrs. Porter grabbed Ethan's arm as he passed. "Bring him back," she said. "That boy needs you." "I know." Outside, the winter afternoon was fading toward evening. The sun hung low and red on the horizon. Ethan's horse was tied near the courthouse. He untied it, swung up into the saddle. Jacob mounted his own horse. "Cole, wait. Let me bring men. Do not go alone." "No time. Every minute he is with Sterling's people is a minute too long." "Then I am coming with you." Together they rode north. The snow was deep in places, slowing the horses, forcing them to pick their way carefully. Ethan's mind was a razor focused on one thing: William, the small boy who had not spoken in 8 months, who had learned to trust again, who had started to heal. If Sterling's men hurt him, if they undid the fragile progress that had been made, Ethan would make them pay in ways that would haunt their nightmares. They rode for an hour. The sun sank below the mountains. Darkness came fast in winter. Jacob lit a lantern. In its light they saw tracks. A wagon had passed this way recently, moving fast, churning up snow. "There," Jacob said, pointing. Ahead, barely visible through the trees, was a small cabin. Light flickered in the window. Smoke rose from the chimney. And tied to a post outside was a wagon. The same wagon Ethan had seen Sterling arrive in that morning. They dismounted 100 yards out, tied their horses, approached on foot. Through the window Ethan could see 3 men inside. 2 were hired guns, the kind of rough men who did dirty work for money and asked no questions. The 3rd was Sterling himself. And there in the corner, tied to a chair with rope, was William. The boy's eyes were wide with fear. His mouth was gagged. He struggled against the ropes, but they were too tight. One of the men laughed, said something Ethan could not hear through the glass. Ethan pulled his pistol. Jacob did the same. "How do you want to do this?" Jacob whispered. "I go through the front. You cover the back in case they run. Cole, there are 3 of them. I do not care if there are 30. That is my son in there." Jacob started to argue, then saw Ethan's face and stopped. There was no reasoning with a father whose child was in danger. He nodded, moved around the back of the cabin. Ethan gave him 30 seconds. Then he walked to the front door and kicked it open. The 3 men inside spun around. One reached for his gun. Ethan shot him in the shoulder before the weapon cleared leather. The man went down screaming. The second man raised his hands. "Easy, friend. We do not want trouble." "Too late for that. Untie the boy, now." Sterling stood slowly. His face was composed, but his eyes showed fear. Real fear. For the first time since Ethan had met him, Victor Sterling understood that money and lawyers and institutional power meant nothing when faced with a man willing to kill. "Mr. Cole, let us discuss this rationally. The boy is fine. I simply wanted to ensure he was safe during the court proceedings. There are dangerous elements in Redemption Creek, people who might try to influence the case. You kidnapped him. I protected him. From what? From you. A single man with no experience, no references. You could be anyone. The court needs time to properly vet your fitness." Ethan's gun never wavered. "Untie him." The second hired man moved toward William, began working at the ropes. The boy's eyes found Ethan and stayed there locked on, desperate and hopeful. The rope came loose. The gag was removed. William slid off the chair and ran. Straight to Ethan, threw his small arms around Ethan's waist and held on with all the strength in his small body. And then something happened that no one expected. Not Sterling, not the hired men, not Jacob who was coming through the back door, not even Ethan himself. William spoke. The word was rough, unpracticed, shaped by a throat that had not made intentional sound in 8 months. But it was clear, unmistakable, a word that changed everything. "Papa." Ethan went absolutely still. The gun in his hand dropped slightly. He looked down at this child who had been silent for so long, who had carried trauma too heavy for a 6-year-old to bear, who had just called him father. "Say that again," Ethan whispered. William looked up. Tears streamed down his face. His voice came stronger, this time more certain. "Papa, do not leave me. Please, Papa." Something broke in Ethan, not in a bad way. In the way that ice breaks in spring, in the way that walls break when they are not needed anymore. He holstered his gun, dropped to his knees, pulled William into his arms and held him while the boy sobbed. William cried with sound now, loud wrenching sobs that had been locked inside since the fire. He cried for his dead parents, for 8 months of silence, for the terror of being taken, for the miracle of being found. He cried, and Ethan held him and let him, rocking him gently, murmuring words of comfort and safety and love. Sterling watched this with growing horror, because he understood what had just happened. A mute boy had spoken, had called this rancher father, in front of a sheriff who would testify to it, in front of witnesses. The case was over. He had lost. Jacob stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Victor Sterling, you are under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. You cannot prove I kidnapped him. My men were protecting him. Your men were holding him prisoner. I saw it with my own eyes. Put your hands behind your back." Sterling's face twisted with rage. "This is not over. I have lawyers. I have friends in Virginia City. I will appeal. I will fight this until—" "Until what?" Jacob snapped the handcuffs closed. "Until you lose everything you already have." That boy just spoke for the first time in months. He called Cole his father. No judge in the territory will give these children back to you now. Jacob led Sterling outside. The hired men followed, one bleeding from Ethan's bullet, the other with his hands raised. They would be charged, tried, sent to prison, or hanged, depending on what else the investigation uncovered. But Ethan did not watch them go. He sat on the floor of the cabin, holding William, feeling the boy's heartbeat against his chest, listening to the sound of his voice, rough and beautiful and miraculous. "We need to get back," Jacob called from outside. "The others will be worried." "In a minute." Ethan pulled back slightly so he could see William's face. "Can you say it again? One more time?" William nodded. His voice was small but growing stronger with each use. "Papa, you are my papa." "Yes, I am, and you are my son. Nothing will change that. Not Sterling, not the law, not anything. You understand?" William nodded again. Then, for the first time since the fire, he smiled, a real smile. Small and tentative, but genuine. They rode back to Redemption Creek with William sitting in front of Ethan on the saddle wrapped in Ethan's coat. The boy did not speak again during the ride. He had used his voice for what mattered most. The rest could wait. The courthouse was ablaze with light when they arrived. People spilled out into the street. Rose saw them first. She ran screaming William's name, and Ethan lifted the boy down so his sister could embrace him. "You spoke," Rose sobbed. "Dr. Wade told us. He heard from one of the deputies. You spoke." William nodded, looked at Ethan. "Papa." Rose looked at Ethan too. Her face was wet with tears, but her expression was fierce with joy. "He called you Papa." "He did." Are you our Papa?" Ethan looked at the five of them, Rose and William, Daniel and Lucy and Esther. These children who had been sold and starved and broken. These souls who had somehow found the courage to trust one more time. "If you will have me," he said. Rose threw her arms around him. Daniel joined her. Lucy limped over and added her small arms to the embrace. Esther wrote on a new slate someone had given her, "Our Papa." She held it up so everyone could see. Judge Morrison stood on the courthouse steps watching this, watching a family that should not exist, that had been forged from desperation and compassion and stubborn refusal to accept that some people were beyond saving. He raised his voice. "Court will reconvene in the morning, but I think we all know what my ruling will be. Go home, Mr. Cole. Take your children home." They rode back to the ranch under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. William sat with Ethan. The others rode in the wagon with Jacob, who had volunteered to drive them so Ethan could focus on the boy who had found his voice. "Will you talk now?" Ethan asked quietly. "Or was that just for emergencies?" William thought about it. "Maybe both. Talking is hard, but I will try, for you. You do not have to try for me. You just have to be you, however that looks. Even if I am still mostly quiet. Even then." They rode in silence for a while. Then William spoke again, the words coming slow but certain. "My mama used to say that family is the people who find you when you are lost. She said that sometimes the people who love you are not the ones you are born to, but the ones you choose, or the ones who choose you." Ethan's throat tightened. "Your mama was right. She would have liked you, I think. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." William leaned back against Ethan's chest. "But I think she sent you to us. Her and your Sarah. I think they are friends up there. I think they planned this." Ethan looked up at the stars, at the vast Wyoming sky, at the universe that was cold and indifferent to human suffering, but that sometimes, just sometimes, aligned in ways that felt like grace. "Maybe they did," he said. "Maybe they did." They reached the ranch as midnight approached. Ethan carried William inside while the others followed. They were too exhausted for celebration, too drained for anything except sleep. But before they went to their rooms, Rose spoke one more time. "Thank you for coming for him, for not giving up. I will never give up on any of you. That is a promise I can keep." She nodded, believed him, because he had proven it. Not with words, but with action, with riding into danger, with facing down armed men, with bringing her brother home. The children went to bed. Ethan sat alone by the fire, feeling the weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. Tomorrow they would return to court. Judge Morrison would make his ruling official. The law would finally recognize what Ethan already knew in his bones. These were his children. This was his family. And nothing, not sterling or poverty or the skepticism of an entire town, would ever change that again. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees. Inside, 5 children slept safe and warm. And somewhere between earth and stars, Ethan Cole allowed himself to believe that broken things could be made whole, that love was stronger than law, and that sometimes, against all odds, hope was enough. The trial would end tomorrow, but the family they had built would last forever. The courthouse bell tower, empty though it was, seemed to echo with an invisible chime as Judge Morrison stood. Every person in that courtroom held their breath. Ethan's hands gripped the edge of the wooden bench until his knuckles went white. Rose stood beside him, one arm around William, the other reaching for Lucy. Daniel and Esther pressed close, all 5 children united in their terror and hope. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief, replaced them. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. "I have been a judge for 30 years, he began, his voice carrying the weight of every case, every decision, every life he had altered with his words. "I have heard thousands of cases. Most are straightforward. The law is clear, the facts undisputed, the outcome predetermined. But some cases, a rare few, require more than legal interpretation. They require wisdom, compassion, the courage to see beyond precedent to what is right." He looked at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, you have operated your facility for 2 decades. Your paperwork is impeccable. Your legal arguments are sound. By the strict letter of territorial law, you have a case. But law exists to serve humanity, not the other way around. And the evidence presented today, both documentary and testimonial, paints a picture of an institution that has failed its fundamental duty to protect the vulnerable." Sterling's face reddened. His lawyer began to rise. Judge Morrison raised a hand. "I am not finished. The medical evidence shows chronic neglect, malnutrition, injuries consistent with abuse. Multiple witnesses have testified to the transformation these children have undergone in Mr. Cole's care. And most damning of all, the children themselves have spoken. Rose Hayes stood in this courtroom and told the truth with a courage that shames us all for allowing such conditions to exist." He turned to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, you violated proper procedure. You bypassed every legal channel designed to protect children from unsuitable guardians. In any normal case, that would be sufficient grounds to deny your petition, but this is not a normal case." Ethan's heart hammered. Was he about to lose them despite everything? Despite Rose's testimony, despite William's tears, despite the truth finally being spoken. The question before this court is not whether you followed procedure. The question is what serves the best interests of these 5 children. And having observed them, having heard testimony from medical professionals and community members, having witnessed the bond that has formed between you and these young souls, I am prepared to make my ruling." Judge Morrison picked up his gavel. The entire courtroom leaned forward. "In the matter of Sterling Home for Orphans versus Ethan Cole, I find as follows. First, the contract signed at the December auction is hereby declared void. It was entered under false pretenses, presented as a labor agreement when it was in fact a sale of human beings, which is prohibited under both territorial and federal law." Sterling shot to his feet. "Your Honor, I protest." "Sit down, Mr. Sterling. I am speaking. Second, based on evidence of neglect and abuse, I am revoking Sterling Home's license to operate as a charitable institution pending a full investigation by territorial authorities. Sheriff Tate, you will ensure that investigation begins immediately." Jacob stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Third, and most important, regarding the custody of Rose Hayes, William Hayes, Lucy Carter, Daniel Foster, and Esther Klein. It is the finding of this court that these children are thriving under Mr. Cole's care. They are fed, clothed, educated, and, most importantly, loved. Therefore, I am granting Mr. Cole temporary custody effective immediately with a path to permanent adoption to be finalized within 90 days once proper documentation is filed. The gavel came down. The sound was like thunder, like a door slamming shut on the past and opening onto an impossible future. For a moment, no one moved. The words hung in the air too large to comprehend all at once. Then Rose made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around Ethan. Lucy was crying. Daniel's face was wet with tears he did not bother to hide. Esther clutched her slate on which she had written a single word in large letters, home. And William, silent William, who had not spoken in 8 months, who had locked his voice away in the place where the fire could not touch it, opened his mouth. "Papa," he said, The word was rough, unused, but unmistakable. Papa. Ethan looked down at this small boy who was calling him father. Something broke in him, some last wall he had been holding against the flood of emotion. He knelt and pulled William into his arms. The boy clung to him, and for the first time since the fire, William cried with sound, deep wrenching sobs that emptied out months of grief and terror and loss. "I am here," Ethan whispered. "I am here, and I am not leaving, and you are safe. You are all safe." The courtroom erupted. People were cheering, clapping, crying. Mrs. Porter dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Dr. Wade smiled, something he did rarely and never without cause. Even Sheriff Jacob looked pleased, though he tried to hide it behind professional neutrality. Only Sterling remained unmoved. He stood rigid, his face purple with rage. "This is a travesty," he shouted. "That man bought children. He bypassed every legal safeguard. And you reward him." Judge Morrison's eyes went cold. "Mr. Sterling, you will lower your voice in my courtroom, and you will count yourself fortunate that I am not ordering your immediate arrest. The evidence suggests crimes far worse than administrative violations. If I were you, I would engage legal counsel and prepare for a very thorough investigation. I have friends, connections. This is not over. In this territory I am the law, and I have made my decision. Sheriff, escort Mr. Sterling from the courthouse. If he returns before the investigation is complete, arrest him for contempt." Jacob moved forward. Sterling glared at him, at Ethan, at the 5 children who had escaped his control. Then he turned and strode from the courtroom, his lawyer following, already scribbling notes for appeals that would go nowhere. The crowd began to disperse. People came forward to congratulate Ethan, to marvel at the children, to offer support they should have offered months ago, but were offering now, which was better than never. Ethan accepted their words with grace, but his attention was on the 5 souls clustered around him, his children, legally now or soon to be, but more than legally, in every way that mattered. They walked out of the courthouse together into brilliant winter sunshine. The snow was blinding white, the sky impossibly blue. The world looked new, as if it had been remade while they were inside deciding their fate. "What happens now?" Rose asked. "Now we go home," Ethan said. "We file the proper paperwork. We make it official. And we live. Just like that. Just like that." They climbed into the wagon. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Wade approached. "Mr. Cole, a word." Ethan stepped down. Wade handed him a folded paper. "My testimony today, written and signed. If Sterling tries to appeal, you will need it. Also, I took the liberty of beginning the adoption paperwork. Bring it to my office next week and we will complete it properly." "Thank you. Do not thank me. Just keep doing what you are doing. Those children need consistency now. Stability. Years of it to undo the damage that was done." "They will have it." Wade nodded, started to turn away, stopped. "Cole, I have delivered hundreds of babies, saved countless lives. But today, watching those children choose you, watching that boy speak for the first time in months, that was the finest thing I have witnessed in 40 years of medicine. You did that. Remember that when the hard days come. And they will come. Raising children always brings hard days." "I know." "Good. Then you are prepared." The wagon rolled out of Redemption Creek toward the ranch. The children were quiet, not from fear, but from exhaustion. They had fought their battle and won. Now they needed rest. But halfway home, Daniel spoke. "What if Sterling comes back? What if he brings men and tries to take us by force? Then I will stop him. You are one man. I am one man who will die before I let anyone hurt you. That is enough." Daniel considered this, nodded slowly. It was enough. For now, it was enough. They reached the ranch as sunset painted the snow gold and pink. The house stood solid smoke rising from the chimney where Ethan had banked the fire that morning. Home. It had been home for weeks, but now it was official. Legal. Permanent. That night, they celebrated. Ethan cooked the best meal he could manage, which was still not great, but the children ate it with enthusiasm. They laughed, told stories, made plans for spring planting, for new rooms to build for the future that stretched ahead of them like an unwritten book. Later, when the younger children were asleep, Rose and Daniel sat with Ethan by the fire. "I want to tell you something," Rose said, "about my mother." "You do not have to. I want to. She used to say that family was not about blood. It was about who stayed, who chose you every day, who loved you even when you were difficult and broken and impossible." She looked at Ethan. "You stayed. You chose us. You loved us when we were all those things. So you are family, not like family. Family." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Your mother was wise. She was, and she would have liked you. They sat in comfortable silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the Wyoming night was cold and dark and vast. But inside, they were warm. 25 years later, on a spring morning in 1901, a very different scene unfolded at that same ranch. The house had grown. New wings had been added, rooms built to accommodate the expanding family. The barn had been rebuilt twice. The fields were productive, the livestock healthy. The ranch that had been one man's lonely refuge had become something else entirely. A legacy, a testament to what love could build. Ethan Cole, now 63 years old, sat on the porch in his rocking chair. His hair was white, his face weathered by decades of sun and wind, his hands gnarled with age and work. But his eyes were still sharp, still kind, still capable of seeing what mattered. Around him, the evidence of those 25 years played out like a living painting. Rose, now 35, stood near the vegetable garden with her husband, a doctor who had studied under Wade. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. The oldest daughter was teaching the youngest to plant seeds, showing her the same patience Rose had once shown Lucy. William, 31 and no longer silent, served as deputy sheriff of Redemption Creek. He stood tall and confident, his voice strong when he spoke to his 2 young sons about responsibility and courage. His wife waved from the kitchen window, where she was preparing food for the family gathering. Lucy, 29, walked without a limp now. Ethan's shoes had been replaced over the years by professional orthotics, but she kept the original pair in a glass case in her home. She had married a carpenter, and they had 4 children, none of them afflicted with her condition, all of them taught that different was not the same as defective. Daniel, 37, managed the ranch. He had taken Ethan's small operation and expanded it, applying the work ethic learned from desperation and the business sense learned from watching Ethan build something from nothing. He had 5 children of his own, deliberately choosing that number in honor of the family that had saved him. And Esther, 33, unmarried by choice, lived in a small cottage on the property. She had become a writer. Her silence transformed into words that filled books. Her latest work, a memoir titled 5 Orphans. One father sat on bestseller lists across the country, telling their story to people who needed to hear that redemption was possible. They had all come home for this gathering, 15 grandchildren running through the fields shrieking with joy. 3 great-grandchildren, still babies, sleeping in the house. The family that had started with 6 broken people now numbered 30. Ethan watched them with satisfaction. This was what Sarah had wanted, a house full of children. Love multiplied across generations, proof that one choice, one moment of compassion could ripple forward through time. Rose climbed the porch steps and sat beside him. "How are you feeling, Papa?" "Old," he admitted, "but content. The doctor said you should rest more." "I will rest when I am dead. Today I want to see my family." She smiled, took his hand. Her skin was smooth and unlined. His was spotted and wrinkled. But the connection between them was as strong as it had been that day in the courthouse when a judge had said the words that changed everything. "Do you remember the auction?" she asked. "Every detail. Why did you do it, really?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. I saw a little girl willing to sacrifice herself for her brother. I saw courage I had forgotten existed. Sarah always said the world needed more people who chose love over safety. You reminded me she was right. Family is not about blood, Rose said softly. It is about who stays. Yes, and I am still here. You are still here. We all stayed. Yes, we did. That evening they gathered for dinner at a table that had been extended multiple times to accommodate everyone. Ethan sat at the head Sarah's chair, still empty beside him after all these years. No one else sat there. It was understood. That space belonged to the woman who had dreamed this into being, even if she had not lived to see it. Before they ate, Daniel stood. I want to say something. The conversation quieted. 30 people turned their attention to the oldest of the original 5. 25 years ago, we were sold at an auction. We were starving, beaten, told we were worthless. And then this man, a stranger who owed us nothing, paid $50 and changed everything. He gave us food, shelter, education. But more than that, he gave us what we had never had, a father, a real one, who stayed even when it was hard, who fought for us even when it was easier to walk away, who loved us even when we were too broken to believe love was real. Daniel's voice cracked. Papa, we were supposed to be nothing, and you made us everything. Thank you for choosing us, for keeping us, for being exactly what we needed when we needed it most. 30 voices echoed the sentiment. 30 people who existed because one man had decided that 5 broken children deserved a chance. Ethan tried to speak, could not. Settled for nodding, for blinking back tears, for accepting the love being poured out around this table. After dinner, after the children had been put to bed and the adults had said their goodnights, Ethan walked to Sarah's grave. The oak tree had grown massive over the decades, its branches spreading like protective arms over the small stone. He knelt with difficulty, his old knees protesting, placed his hand on the cold marble. I did it, he whispered. Everything you wanted, 5 children, now 15 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, the house is full. There is laughter, there is love. You would be so proud of them, Sarah. They are magnificent. He sat there for a long time, feeling the weight of years, the accumulation of joy and sorrow and ordinary moments that had built this extraordinary life. When he finally stood, Rose was waiting a respectful distance away. You should not be out here in the cold, Papa. I needed to tell her. She knows, I am sure she knows. They walked back to the house together. Inside, Esther was reading to some of the grandchildren. William was playing checkers with his sons. Lucy was knitting by the fire. Daniel was reviewing accounts, making sure the ranch would thrive into the next generation. Ethan settled into his chair, looked around at this family that should not have existed, this legacy built from one act of compassion on a frozen December morning so long ago. 2 days later they found him. He had walked to Sarah's grave just after dawn, sat down with his back against the oak tree, and quietly, without fuss or drama, stopped breathing. He died as he had lived those final 25 years, surrounded by love, even if that love was present only in memory and earth, and the whisper of wind through new spring leaves. They buried him beside Sarah. The entire town came. People who had judged him, who had doubted him, who had eventually come to see that he was right and they were wrong. They came to honor a man who had proven that one person could make a difference, that broken things could be mended, that love was stronger than law or money or institutional power. The headstone was simple. Ethan Cole, 1838 to 1901, beloved father, savior of 5, guardian of generations. At the funeral, William spoke. His voice was strong now, confident, bearing no trace of the silent trauma that had once defined him. My father taught us that family is not blood. It is choice. It is commitment. It is the decision to love even when love is hard to stay, even when staying costs everything to believe that people are worth saving, even when the world says otherwise. He paused, looked at his siblings, at their children, at the legacy standing before him. We were 5 orphans sold at an auction. He was one man with a broken heart and $50. Together we became this: a family, a testament, proof that the world is not all darkness, that there are still people who see suffering and step forward instead of away, that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to reach for it. The service ended. People dispersed. But the 5 original children remained standing together at the graves of Ethan and Sarah Cole. "He kept his promise," Lucy said quietly. "He said he would never leave us, and he never did. Even now he is not leaving," Esther added. "Look at what he built. We carry him forward in every choice we make, every kindness we show, every child we protect." Daniel knelt, placed his hand on the fresh earth. "We were supposed to be nothing. He made us everything. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." Rose was the last to speak. "He saved us." But he would say we saved him too, and maybe that is the real lesson. That salvation is never one direction, that broken people can heal each other, that love, real love, transforms everyone it touches. They stood together as the sun rose higher, as the spring wind blew warm across the Wyoming plains, as the world continued turning indifferent to grief, but forever changed by the love that 6 people had built in defiance of every odd against them. Years later, Esther would add a final chapter to her book. She would tell of the funeral, of the legacy, of how 5 orphans had become the foundation of something larger than any of them had dreamed possible. She would write the words that Ethan had lived, but never spoken the truth that had guided him through every hard choice. And the choice to love, to stay, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, that choice ripples forward through time, touching lives that will never know the name of the person who started the chain, but will benefit from it nonetheless. The book ended with a simple sentence, one that captured everything Ethan Cole had been, everything he had given, everything he had proven possible. We were 5 orphans. He was one father. Together we were enough. The story closed, but the legacy lived on, in children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. In a ranch that still stood still, thrived, still welcomed those who needed shelter. In a town that remembered the day a single man had stood against institutional power and won. And in the hearts of 5 people who had been bought for $50 and had been given in return something worth infinitely more: a home, a family, a future, and the knowledge carried forward through generations that one person's compassion can change the world. The end.